On this channel, I've made 2 video essays on the top-down indie RPG, Undertale. As you all know, this game features 3 major routes that you can decide to do. I talked about the genocide route and why I actually love it, and I also talked about the neutral route and its decision making, but I've never talked about the route that honestly, most people consider their favorite, the pacifist route, or I guess, the true pacifist route. We're just gonna refer to it as the pacifist route throughout most of this video, but yes, the true pacifist route has a bit more character interactions and has a different final boss. Here's the thing about this route, I get why it might be your favorite. It absolutely has the most satisfying ending that the game has to offer, but for me, I just found it not just a bit less interesting, but also just not really replayable, which I'm not saying it's a bad thing that it's not replayable, since Undertale isn't really supposed to be, but today, I'm just going to be going over my thoughts on the true pacifist route of Undertale. No need for a fancy introduction, but I do think this video will be shorter than the neutral route video. I don't have too much to say about the true pacifist route, but I'm just making this video for people who want to know what I think about it. Shameless self-plug, but consider following me on Twitter if you're still on there. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy my stuff. Let's jump in. So we're gonna begin this video by explaining what makes this route good, even if it's not my favorite. Let's be honest, we're playing this route because it has the most uplifting story, and like I said, it has the most satisfying conclusion for the characters. It's a happy ending for literally every character compared to the neutral route where typically not much changes, and the genocide route where everyone is just, well, dead. In a world with so much suffering, it's nice to see the characters end up living good lives after the events of the game. And as for the story during the route itself, it's pretty good. There are more cutscenes and events than the other routes because your main goal is to become friends with them. In the regular pacifist route, you're just trying to not kill anybody, but in the true pacifist route, you also need to make them love you. If you're somebody who enjoys the story aspect of video games, you're most likely gonna like this route the best. I know the genocide route has good artistic narrative design, but pacifist is more of the turn your brain off and enjoy type of story, but maybe that's not the best way to explain it because there are good themes in this route that I would care to explain, but it's been over a year since I've done this route, and yes, it has been over a year. I'll touch on that in a few minutes. I now want to ask the question, is it bad that the pacifist route focuses most on the story aspect of video games? Should all video games prioritize gameplay before story? In my opinion, no. Many gamers will say that the point of a video game is to prioritize the gameplay aspect over anything else. And while I would say that sentiment is true for most games, there's still definitely a market for games that overwhelmingly prioritize the story side of the medium. Let's not get it twisted. Story is not as important as gameplay in the grand scheme of things. But let's also not pretend that story video games are inherently the same experience as watching a movie. Video games are interactive media. You're not just watching a story, you're in the story. You're a part of the story. And that's especially true with RPGs where you get to name the character, like Undertale. And I know someone's gonna say in the comments, actually in Undertale you don't get to name the character you name at the title screen is actually, yeah, nobody cares, the game only tells you that at the end of Pacifist. Anyway, what was I talking about again? Undertale's pacifist route focuses on the story of the game and I respect it. However, that does come with its negative side effects. One of those negative side effects being the replayability, the title of the video. I fully understand that Undertale is not meant to be a replayable game, and that's completely fine. Not every game has to be replayable, but just because it's not meant to be replayable doesn't mean I won't say it how it is. Basically, my reasoning for saying it's not replayable comes down to what the other routes offer that this one does not. The neutral route has almost 100 different possibilities because of how many choices you can make, and the genocide route is shorter in length, so it's easier to replay. But for the pacifist route, you don't really get any choices and it's easily the longest route in the game. Since there's no choices, there's no reason to replay it because it will always be the exact same experience. I have heard that there's a slightly different cutscene if you do pacifist after doing genocide, but I just can't imagine it being worth another 6-hour playthrough. Maybe I'm incorrect, but it just seems like one of those things to look up on YouTube to save time. And you know how I said that it's been a year since I've done this route? Well, for the other video essays I made, I replayed those routes to make those videos, but forgive my laziness here, I just did not feel like replaying the true pacifist route because I just legitimately felt like it would be a waste of my time. I actually played through pacifist on stream, so the VODs are still up if you're interested, but I genuinely did enjoy the route my first time, but I tried to replay the pacifist route once, but I just got so bored because of how slow this route's pacing is. Listen, I know that the genocide route technically has way worse downtime because you literally just walk walk in circles and kill enemies. It's literally like shiny hunting in a Pokemon game, but it really doesn't take as long as you might think. And honestly, the neutral route is really the only mode I would consider replayable. It's got all those previously mentioned choices to make, and naturally it's the perfect balance of gameplay. And speaking of gameplay, let's talk about that next. So the gameplay in Pacifist is a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, it's not technically the worst, since in Genocide you're literally walking in circles for like an hour. However, I just prefer attacking enemies instead of going through the effort to spare them. But hey, it's a different type of gameplay. The battles last longer, sure, but each enemy is spared in a specific way which makes the battles less repetitive technically. But in Neutral and Genocide, the enemies still have their own unique attacks, so I thought it was already decent balance. The combat in Pacifist is kind of like a puzzle, which is okay, but I do prefer the combat from the other routes. Now, it is cool that you can't level up and thus you're stuck at 20 HP the entire route, and you don't need to worry about getting better weapons since, you know. One thing that I think hinders my enjoyment of the Pacifist route is that you know how the normal progression of the route system would be Neutral, Pacifist, and Genocide? Well, after you've already done Neutral, all those puzzles out in the overworld you've already done, so it feels like downtime to have to do them again. Again, this is just a nitpick, and for those who played through Pacifist first, that won't be an issue. Generally, I feel like when people say that Undertale has bad gameplay, which by the way, I do not agree with, but I think when most people say that, they're talking about the Pacifist route of the game, and like we talked about, this route is more about the story, and that's okay. But yeah, I prefer the gameplay in the other two routes. Even if Genocide has that whole walking in circles thing going on, Genocide makes up for it by having my two favorite bosses in the game. And the Neutral route is the funnest way to fight those bosses that are also present in Pacifist. Objectively speaking, there are arguments to be made for Pacifist having good gameplay and good combat, but I prefer the other routes for both of these things. So I know this video wasn't as well versed or as long as the other videos I've made on this game, but it's been a bit since I've talked about it, so it's just not fresh in my mind. But in conclusion, the true Pacifist route has a lot of things going for it. The satisfying story makes the characters more lovable than ever, and the gameplay is much more about puzzle solving and trying to do the right thing before doing the selfish thing, but it also lacks some things that the other routes succeed at, mostly the pacing and the replayability. And I just think that overall, the main reason it's my least favorite route is that the others are just a bit of a more original experience. Not to say that Pacifist is unoriginal, but the Neutral route has so many possibilities and outcomes, and the Genocide route, I mean, there's just nothing else like it. Undertale is not necessarily aiming to be replayable, do not get me wrong, but if you choose to replay the game anyway, you're not going to want to choose Pacifist. It's still definitely a high quality way to experience Undertale. So once again, like I've always said, I recommend trying all three routes in the game to see which one you fancy best. I have some big videos planned, so stay tuned, but that's it for today, and have a good rest of your day.